looking forward to this project that Christian Parker Robinson has been through.
I think that so many different things has taken away the trust in the city of Gary, so many people don't want to believe in it as the federal.
I would certainly say that Gary has believed. And when I say that,
initially my thought was, I really see how we can do it out. And you're right, it's been one big move. Gary has been looted by. I think Gary has been looted some of the more material tangible things,
Gary, Indiana was founded in the year of 1908 by a man named Albert H. Gary, who happened to be a member of the U.S. Steel Commission Board. Gary has become special for many different reasons. Whether you've gotten a hot dog from the village, or you've been a season ticket holder at U.S. Steel Yard, there is something special about Gary that you just won't forget. You may wonder who I am, or maybe why you're even watching this. My name is Christian Robinson, a lifelong resident of Gary, Indiana. I've been blessed to travel many places and do many things in this world. However, Gary, Indiana will always remain home. As a concerned citizen, I understand that Gary is suffering, Gary is tired, and that Gary is looted. In 1956, Ebony magazine ranked Gary, Indiana, the #1 place for blacks to live at the time. Around the peak of the city's history, Gary was once home to nearly 200,000 citizens. In the late 50s, urban living became obsolete, causing Gary's population to split. Those who could afford to do so moved South County, which led Gary to becoming one of the most segregated cities in America.
growing up in Gary was a dream, in fact. It was a city full of resources. It was a city full of activities. The city was thriving. There was a thriving downtown. Of course, there was a point during my teenage years when it became clear that something was changing. There was a time when my mother and I would come downtown and start in the 800 block and go all the way down to the 500 block, and the street of Broadway was full of stores. Probably by the time I was 13 or 14, there was only one movie theater downtown. The stores were starting to leave. You could see a marked difference, and that was in the early 70s, really.
Yeah, when I was a child, Gary was in its heyday. It was a bustling, robust community. It was a hub of shopping for Northwest Indiana. People even came from the east to shop in Gary. We were thriving. There were very few vacant homes. People were looking for places to live. We were proud of Gary, Indiana. It was our home.
Growing up was very exciting because I grew up in a business family. My dad was the first African American to open a gas station in Gary, Indiana in 1923 or 1925.
Yeah, I had a kind of a sweet upbringing in terms of activities. I was a Girl Scout from third grade until I graduated what they call like middle school. I was also in Jack and Jill, which was where, one of my best friends today, that's where we first became friends. I was involved in my church a lot, Israel CME and the children's choir, and also within the youth usher board and ministry. And then I also was involved heavily in politics and public service. I grew up in that tradition. And so from registering former convicted felons to driving people to the poll to being dropped off as a canvasser, both with Obama's campaign in 2008 and with my own mom's and our family friends, and getting kind of dropped off on the block and people saying, okay, now you knock on doors. I had that upbringing and I was able to be involved in that stuff growing up in Gary.
If your family resided between 11th Avenue and 25th Avenue, there were quite a number of black men and women who had businesses. They had gas stations, they had drugstores, they had cleaners, they had auto repair shops. All the professionals, the attorneys, the MDs, the dentists. In fact, my dentist growing up was Dr. Marshall, who incidentally was the father of Bill Marshall, the actor. And while Bill was going to school, he worked for his dad as an assistant to assisting him in dentistry.
At one time, Gary, Indiana had the best school system. You had educators or newly graduates coming from everywhere to teach here in Gary. And so that was a part of the Black Mecca. You came either here to teach or you came here to work at the mill. Now, both of those opportunities, as you would say, are no more. We can't get anybody who went to school here at the Indiana University campus to even stay here and teach because it's just not there anymore, and that saddens me.
Well, I'm not going to limit it just to the Black Mecca. I think it's a city that has opportunities for everyone, regardless of race, religion, political background, or national origin. It's a place for everybody. So I don't really agree with the term Black Mecca because it's for everyone, regardless of race.
What about City of the Century?
Well, City of the Century I would support, and I do agree with that because it was a city that transformed America with United States Steel Corporation. And in later years, we had the entertainment industry was strongly affected by the presence of Michael Jackson. So anywhere you go in the world, one of the questions I do hear is that the home of Michael Jackson? So we want to expand it not only to Michael Jackson, because we have so many great other people who have done great things that have an effect all over the world.
Well, what we were trying to project with that model was that we were the role model exemplar for the nation, what a city could be. We were indeed growing, we were vibrant, we had a robust economy, people were migrating here, and so that was the concept behind the City of the Century.
If you look at pictures of Gary from like the 70s and stuff, there was 4 lanes of traffic going up and down Broadway, and the sidewalks was packed. We had a booming steel, going. This was long before I got here, But so then it would be the City of the Century, I believe.
Richard Gordon Hatcher, born on July 10, 1933, became the 16th mayor of Gary, Indiana, and the first black man to become elected mayor of a major U.S. city. Hatcher was born in Michigan City, Indiana. He attended Valparaiso and Indiana University. Hatcher launched a primary challenge against an incumbent mayor, Martin Katz, in the Democratic primary, and he won by just 2,300 votes.
But when I was in high school, I actually was born in '67, so that was right at the peak of when Mayor Hatcher became mayor of the city of Gary. I think it was like maybe 175,000 people. And we were really, even though I could be like maybe 2 years old, but we were really from that time until I would say my high school years really feeling the whole Black Power kind of thing moving over our city. Everybody was so proud. Everyone was so just, in love with being from Gary, Indiana, because we had so many things going on.
Him during that period. Shortly and early in 68 now, he's sworn in. And by the way, there's always been this major debate as to who was the first African-American mayor, he or Carl Stokes of Cleveland, who also won. But I think Hatcher's claim was that he was sworn in first in late 67 or the early part of 68. So now it's April of his first year, and I'm about to, with my wife, go back to Philadelphia to apply for teaching jobs in Philadelphia. When I get a call from his office and asking me to come down to his office on my lunch hour, I'm thinking it's just to say, don't let that teachers organization fizzle, try to keep it together and functioning. I get to City Hall and he offers me a job with his administration. Well, two things are wrong with that. I don't know anything about municipal government. And secondly, I'm got one foot out the door, getting ready to go to Philadelphia on the spring break later in April to apply for a job in Philadelphia. And I offered a million excuses. I said, well, I'm under contract. And someone picked up the phone and called a school board member and asked whether a teacher can get a leave of absence. And in short, swift, they said, yeah, we can do that. I said, well, I don't know anything about municipal government. I said, then as I mentioned, that Gary was an urban laboratory. There were all kinds of consultants in and out and technical grants and so forth. They said, we'll get you some assistance. I'd run out of excuses, so I said, well, let me talk it over with my wife. And she accepted the challenge as well. If that's what you want to do, we can try that. And I started with him after the spring break in April, and was with him all through 1988, his 4 terms in office. And there was always some challenge. I mean, at that point, municipal government for an African American and all of us rookies was kind of challenging. But we trudged on through challenge after challenge, and he made it for 4 terms as mayor of the city of Gary.
I met him at Valparaiso University in the stairwell, and I was in the School of Liberal Arts studying government and political science, and he was in the law school, which was 1 floor below. And we met in the stairwell, and we began to talk, and we became friends. And we remained friends until he ran for mayor and I ran for councilman at large. He believed at the time that my running for councilman at large would hurt his chances at becoming mayor of Gary. Actually, it didn't, because we both won.
And one of his travels across the country, he was always traveling somewhere, he crossed paths with James Brown, who was the African-American entertainer at that time, and James Brown wanted to know what he could do to help him in his, I think this may have been his 3rd or 4th year. And the mayor said, well, you could come in and do a concert to raise some money for youth activities. That turned out to be a debacle, because I think part of it was that James Brown was disappointed after all of the arrangements were made that the mayor was not there personally to greet him at the airport. And Gary had never had activity that size at West Side. West Side's gymnasium could seat 6,000 folk. And Gary at that point wasn't accustomed to buying tickets in advance. So it was a cold winter night, and the line was wrapped double around the gymnasium. People wanted tickets, and this was the late 60s. I think the tickets were only $5 or $6. But people wait till the last minute, didn't buy tickets in advance. And we were trying to collect all that money and get folk into the gymnasium out of that cold. And as the gymnasium filled up, then James Brown's manager walks out and says, well, we have to settle up on Mr. Brown's costs. And so I said, what do you mean? Now, I'm in charge of this now, and the mayor is on his way back, I think, from Philadelphia. I said, what do you mean? This is supposed to be a benefit concert. He says, well, Mr. Brown has expenses, and if it were a true benefit, we would not have brought the full band and all the dancers and so forth. I said, my goodness. By the time we finished counting up the money, which was at that point, it's hard to count up to $15,000 with all those singles and $5 bills, which delayed the concert even more. People in the gymnasium are restless, angry, all this 2 hours now after the starting time. We counted the money, $15,000 roughly. James Brown's manager took it and put it in 2 or 3 briefcases and said, Mr. Brown will now come on stage. Long story short, I said, man, now the mayor is back now wanting to know, well, what's going on? I said, well, it wasn't exactly a benefit. Mr. Brown wanted to be compensated for all of this. And now I don't know how in the world we explained the next day that we had the largest concert in the history of Gary and don't have a cent in the bank to show for that. And it was difficult explaining all that, and it made national news once more. Soul Brother #1 arguing with first African-American mayor. And so James Brown's people then wanted to kind of soothe that over and wanted them to get together on national TV to say it wasn't that big a deal or whatever, we can resolve this.
There was an effort on the part of white activists and political figures to have Gary's southern boundary extended to US 30, which is Maryville today. Hatcher opposed that. He did not want the boundary to go beyond 53rd Avenue, and he believed that it would handicap him from being reelected as mayor of Gary. And so there was legislation introduced by, I believe it was Adam Benjamin, who was state senator at the time, that eliminated the buffer zone, which existed between Gary and Maryville, the unincorporated area of the area.
The Indiana law said that there had to be a buffer zone between municipalities. One of my colleagues somehow, this was before I got to the General Assembly, it erased that piece of the legislation that said that there has to be a 2-mile or 4-mile buffer zone, and that meant that Gary and Maryville was created, Maryville created, and right, there's nothing that separates them except a street sign. And once more, mainly because that was all farmland out there in Maryville before it just grew and grew. And now we as African Americans are probably the major residents in Maryville now. And they're moving farther south to Crown Point and on to St. John and anything to get away from us, African Americans. But the lakefront is not going anywhere and U.S. Steel is not going anywhere. So they all, early, it's 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. If you stand out there somewhere near I-65, it looked like it's daylight out there because all those cars traveling into the city of Gary, because the majority of the employees are white and live outside of the corporate limits of Gary.
Well, Gary's economics was robbed by the creation of Maryville. I represent Maryville now, and I try to do my best to support them, and I recognize they're part of my district, and I will never be a traitor to them, but the truth is the truth. There's a cycle that oppressors put oppressed people through. When we came to this country, we were in shackles and chains, and so we were in physical bondage. We had to stay on the plantation. We had to go where the master said we had to go. We had to do what the master said do. So we were in physical bondage. When we were freed from the plantation, then we were put into what was called political bondage. We were considered 3/5 of a person. Therefore, we didn't have the right to vote. So when we broke out of political bondage, cities like Gary, when they broke out of political bondage, what the oppressor did was put us in the next phase of bondage, which is economic bondage. They took away the lifeblood of our community. What is the lifeblood of our community? It's the tax base that we had. It's the businesses that we had. And so we got a Chet Dobus who took our buffer zone, which was our growth area, and created a city, a town in that area. So they put us in economic bondage. What automatically comes with economic bondage is social bondage. If you don't have resources, people begin to exhibit antisocial behavior. And so what we had was the naming of Gary being the murder capital of the Midwest, and we had drug sales and people doing all kinds of things to survive. And so we were in social bondage. And once you're in social bondage, what happens is with your antisocial behavior, you end up going to prison. Prison is a new plantation. And so we're back in physical bondage. So when you get into physical bondage back in prisons, then you come out and you don't have the right to vote. Initially, you come out, all of your rights to vote is gone, so you're back in political bondage. And because we don't have the knowledge to understand that in this state and many states across the United States, once you become a felon, you can never vote again. But in Indiana, you can. I've tried to convince inmates, ex-inmates, ex-felons that they can vote. And they say, no, I can't vote. I'm not gonna get in trouble. I'm not gonna register to vote. And so we're back in political bondage. So they're back in political bondage, and they go back into economic bondage. We also got a record. It's difficult for you to get a job, so you get economic bondage, and then you go from economic bondage, you gotta survive, you go back into a social bondage, you start doing antisocial things, and you end up back in prison. We call it recidivism. It's a process, and that's what oppressors are doing to us. And we have a city here that is a prime opportunity for anybody who wants to come in and invest. But what's going to happen is that they're going to let Gary go down as far as he can go down. They're going to come in and buy it up and take it over. That's what they did in Annapolis. Look what they did in Annapolis. When I first went to the legislature in 1990, when I went down there, downtown in Annapolis was the pits. I didn't want to stay down there. I could have got a condo. It was really nice for $35,000, but nobody wanted to stay in downtown Indianapolis. But look at it now. And that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen to us, and we don't understand that we have a diamond in the rough and that we need to hold on to it.
The streets of Gary, Indiana changed during the crack era of 1980.
We kind of got this silo thing going on over here. You know, everybody has to have their own, and I'm not sure why. There's so many brilliant people and hardworking people out here, and can actually create for themselves, you know, an opportunity. But they don't want to, it seems to me at least, that they don't want to join with other like-minded folks. Do you feel me? All right, so it's kind of like, you know, they don't want to work together with other people who might already be doing what they want to do, you know, for whatever reason. And then there's what I call the crab barrel effect. You familiar with that? You familiar with the crab barrel? You know, you get a barrel full of crabs, they got to breathe air, they're all going up to get air, right? Well, the one gets to the top, well, the one on the bottom says, wait a minute, I want that air. He reaches up, he'll grab him by the leg, and, you know? So I don't, there's plenty for everybody to eat here in Gary. And for whatever reason, I can't really put my finger on it, but it's kind of like, that's mine.
As I've been thinking about this, you know, in this day of 2020, you know, you think of a band of thieves that, you know, come in and steal and break windows, do all kind of destruction. And, you know, that's how they're, in the name of protest, we have looters now who have been, you know, just that, doing all of that, what I just mentioned. But I could see now, and initially my thought was, I don't really see how we've been looted. But now I understand your point very clearly in thinking of the looting that, you know, not only has been done by big businesses like the Mill, you know, they come here and people have come here with a bill of goods saying that, oh, this is what's good for your city. Allow me to do this. Give me a tax break for this. Give me, you know, give me. And you're like, okay, because you're thinking that, you know, any development and people come in and say, oh, we have jobs. We're bringing this value to your community. We'll bring this to your school system. And you're right. It's just been one big loot.
I would have to say that there's a number of people that probably took advantage of Gary, Indiana, you know, for what was here and what could have continued to be here, but they chose not. I believe that they chose. I don't have a whole lot of exact information, but I believe that some of the resources could have been used in other ways.
I think Gary has been looted of some of the more material and tangible things, obviously businesses, thriving schools, libraries, and all sorts of innovative spaces that will help us build our education and vocations. But I think the city has been looted of some basic things we need to thrive, like love.
Well, looted to me means that something is being taken away unfairly. That someone else is taking advantage of the resources that belong to a certain person or a certain group or a city, and without just compensation.
Loot is when you take...
My definition of looted is something important being taken away, something vital being taken away from a community, depriving them of something that is needed, not even a community, but anything in life.
Gary has been looted by big business.